Great. Well, thanks for doing this. Thanks for reaching out and wanting to share your story. I'm excited to learn more about what you're doing and help people to come to know what's going on. So thanks for that opportunity.
You got it. You got it.
Can you start off just by telling about a little bit about your background and how you got to start working with churches?
Sure. I'm relatively new to faith. So I came to Christ 9 years ago. So I, didn't really grow up in the church. There is a lot of Catholic tradition in my family, but I think it's more like, the paper tradition than actual faith. And let me stop that. There you go. So for many years, I was never looking for God. In fact, I didn't need him. It was not, I think life was good. Life was good. And some people will describe this like vacuum or something missing. I never really felt that way. I always felt like there's something next. I mean, there's always a next step to my life, but I never felt like there was something missing. 9 years ago, moved to Annapolis and was just hit in the face with Jesus. Like, who's this Jesus? And had this really, really young pastor just talk so boldly about him. And I was just too curious about like who this God was. And so anyway, that started actually my path of working with churches. I already had the agency at that point. I was already working with marketing, mostly websites. That was our big, production line was just websites. Came to faith and, I did what every Christian does, which is to quit their job and move to Africa, right? We all think like we need to go feed your kids. So yeah, I mean, it didn't really come out of my mouth that way, but there was this thought in the back of my mind that I had to quit my business. Like I couldn't continue to work with websites and have a company. And I had to do something that, because, God needs your help. You got to go fix the world somehow. And I clearly remember being in the kitchen one day and just like almost audibly, God speaking to me saying, I didn't ask you to quit anything. I do want you to redirect what you're doing and use it for my kingdom. But I never asked you to quit. In fact, all the things you're doing now is because I've equipped you with that. And now it's time to use it for me. So I was like, oh, well, what does that look like? So that started my journey and basically working with churches and bringing all of my expertise, including the languages, to helping them with things that are just harder for, people that are in ministry 24/7. So, yeah.
Great. Can you tell us why you started Word Revolution?
So at that time, it was when we changed the name. So the agency already existed. I've always been in communication marketing of some sort. That's always been, my career. But at that point, it was pivotal. So I had to rename. I had to find a new name for my company. And, it came from this desire to basically start a revolution. I knew it was through the word of God that we would achieve that, so that was kind of how the name came about. So although the company already existed, it took a different shape. It started to become something a little different, until God asked me to email all my previous clients and tell them about this. And I was like, well, that's going to be interesting. Because it wasn't something new that you start on the side. It was a very like radical shift, and it was very Paul-like overnight, suddenly you see, So I had to email all my clients, and I remember, previous clients, and I remember being in this place of, oh no, I don't even want to write this email. Mm-hmm. To then, okay, now it's written, I don't even want to click send. So, until I, click send and close the computer and left, because now I'm literally going to lose all of these clients like overnight. That I guess that's what God's trying to do, is like, he's just going to take them all away from me. And he didn't. So what happened after that was unbelievable. So a lot of my clients were Christians and I didn't know. And they started just, applauding the boldness and saying, wow, good for you. And this is amazing. And a bunch of them referred me to their pastor. So overnight, I gained this, a big chunk of new clients that I didn't have before, through what I thought was God killing my business. So, yeah. So that's how we started. It was pretty radical.
Yeah, it's very radical.
Yeah.
It's amazing what happens when you follow God's plan for your life, not knowing
Not
how
knowing.
it's going to work.
Exactly.
So can you talk a little bit about Word Revolution? And so if there's a church or a small ministry out there, how can Word Revolution help?
So in these, last few years, I would say maybe since 2004 was when I was like, I'm sorry, 2014. So about 4 years ago, that's when I've been, exclusively focused on reaching churches and speaking to Christian ministries. And over, what I thought was, okay, I need to go in, design their website and leave, or I need to go in, create this social media plan and then leave. It started changing into something a little bit different. And I think it was out of conviction, but also observation, realizing that there are limitations as far as people, money, and time in many of the churches, not just in the U.S., but in the U.S. alone, most churches have less than 100 people, 100, 200 people. So the large majority of churches around us are not the 1,500 people, 10,000 people, and they have all the budget in the world. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's not even a budget issue. It's really resources like volunteers and people to help. So they're all overworked, right? So I came to the realization that the church didn't need me to come in and just fix a piece and then leave, as much as they needed me to come in, share my expertise, kind of enable them to start using what they already had, and then from there execute. So I noticed that although I could be an executor in parts of it, and I could come in as an executor for maybe the larger churches, which we still do, by the way. We still help churches basically understand who they are, why they're being called to this neighborhood when there's another 10 pastors in the same city. Understand why they've been called, and then from there build whatever they need built. Sometimes it's a website, sometimes it's basically their brand, like what are they even going to be named. My biggest realization, Jeremy, was there's really just a lack of understanding how to utilize what they already have, their resources. So that's how 412 Lab was born. It was out of this desire to just equip and train them and show them, look, this is how you can create your communication strategy independent of your size, independent of your budget. So most people are importing what other large churches are doing, and sometimes it doesn't work at their church, and that creates frustration. Or, which is most common, is they don't have the resources to execute the same strategy that someone else is doing. So, and that creates frustration as well. We come alongside the smaller churches more as a mentor, training, kind of, I don't like to say coach, because I feel like the coach is like that guy on the outside where the mentor walks with you. You know what I'm saying? Like the mentor has been there. The mentor has been through those same struggles, and it's just a matter of sharing experience and popping the hood and saying, hey, I was right there with you, and this is what I did. So that's where I found the greatest needs, is to just share knowledge. As you know, we don't lack information. I mean, there's an excessive information nowadays, but because of that excessive information, people don't know where to start. They don't know where to begin. They don't know how to curate. So my role has been one of a curator, and say, okay, all of this noise coming your way, let me assess where you are, what kind of resources you have available. Okay, you only have 3 full staff members. You can only do so much. Maybe your next step is to train volunteers, and we can create a strategy to create a team of volunteers, for example. Yeah. So that's where we fit in. And we've seen great, transformation through that. So.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that Indigenous feels strongly about is that strategies need to be dependent on your context, that everyone's culture is different, everyone's capabilities are different, so there's not a one size fits all answer for anybody. So it's really great to have that customized approach to it.
Yes, and that's what we've seen. But, creating something custom for a church can be quite expensive because it requires a lot of resources. And what I've been trying to do is just train them on creating their own strategies that will grow or not with their church, because we've seen churches growing. Hopefully that's what's happening with many churches around the world, but sometimes they will decrease in time in size, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like churches that multiply will decrease in resources very quickly. So they may plant another church and lose 20 very strong members that are strong in the tithing, strong in the volunteering, and those resources will be felt. So your strategy needs to adapt. If you're importing from somebody else, overnight your strategy doesn't work anymore. So okay, what do we do? So instead of just saying, hey, here's this great strategy that worked for this church over here, we train them on how to create their own strategies, and it's all people-centric. So we start from the people. I tend to say that the biggest problem, a large issue that churches face is they do tools first, then create their processes, and then look at their people. And what we do is try to invert that and say, you start with the people. From there, you craft your processes, and only then you'll look at the tools that you need to execute. So, and you probably see this often, everybody saying, you need to be on Facebook, you need to be on Twitter, you need to be on, well, maybe you don't. So we give them the freedom to decide, you know what, we're not going to worry about this particular tool because our people are hanging out over here. So, yeah.
Great. I love a quote that's on your website that I'm going to read. It says, your ministry does not need a website. What you need are disciples who make disciples, generous and joyful givers, committed volunteers. What you need is an organic but intentional spreading of the gospel. Mm-hmm. Can you give an example of how Word Revolution has helped a ministry or a church do that?
Yeah. So I have a few, but I'll share with you one of my favorites. This was a church in Tennessee that we worked with a little while ago, and through a series of discovery sessions and asking them questions, because we can't fly to Tennessee. Well, we could, but most of the time we do these things remotely. But we'll ask them questions to understand their audience, who they're trying to reach, and they know them very well. So when I asked them questions, every time I would ask them questions about, who do you see already coming to your church and who's around you? Because sometimes they match, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're just attracting one group, and around you there's a completely different group of people. We came to the conclusion that there's a lot of single moms that were just not, didn't really have a lot of church background. Okay, so that was the group of people they felt that they could serve really well at this stage of their lives. And one of the main things we try to work together on is a tagline. Before we even design anything, we work on creating a tagline for them. And what we call the coffee shop pitch, because, people don't pitch in elevators anymore, so they pitch in coffee shops, right? So we have conversations, and if we always present it this way. So what do you say to people when you're sitting with somebody for the first time in a coffee shop, someone introduced you to them, like, what do you say to them? And over, they kept repeating the same things. And they'll say, we just tell them, look, just come and join me. I'll sit with you in church. Because, you could talk Bible verses all day long, but at the end of the day, what they were saying to these people in real life was just come and see, come and join me. So we came to the conclusion that, the best way to communicate what they do is not with this long vision statement that nobody knows how to repeat, which I find it's great for churches to have a vision and a mission statement. But if only the pastor can recite it by heart and nobody else, you're missing out on who you are, what do you stand for. So we simplified it to come and see. That's it. And so the first thing you see when you come to their website is come and see. Because that's the core of who they were. They were reaching people that maybe wouldn't understand this idea of following Jesus yet, or wouldn't understand this idea of, making disciples. And those are all true, and they still happen at the church. But the first point of contact was simply an invitation. So anyway, we finished that. We did that project with them. And, to this day, even kids can say it. Come and see. So makes it easy. Yeah.
That's great. So you share a story about being an accidental church communicator on the website, and how that was a bit of an experience. Can you talk about what that was like and how that led to being a mentor with 412 Lab?
So that was the church that I started, that I came to Christ. So when I started attending, they didn't even have church yet, which is pretty funny because I stumbled upon this church when they were just trying to get their team together, and they were giving out free water in Annapolis. And so I got this bottle of water, had a tag in it, and I went home and I checked it, and I was like, oh, I thought it was going to be like a restaurant or a dance club or something, and it's a church. Like, what kind of church does that? So that was very intriguing to me, and that's how I met the pastor and his wife, and a month later got baptized. I mean, it was just like very, I don't know, it was a huge aha moment. But they didn't even have the services yet. So soon enough, they're building their team, and I'm already going, I already have the agency going on. So I just told them, look, if you guys ever need any graphics done or website or printing, you name it, just let me know. So it was an opportunity for me to serve. And it started with designing some things and moved on to doing the slides on Sunday. And then it moved on to doing a website. And it just kept going to the point where, I was doing it almost, every week for many hours, joyfully so. So I wasn't complaining about it. But there was just this in the back of my mind, I was like, man, there has to be a better way to do this. Why do I have to wait for a Saturday night for the pastor to send me the notes? And, can we organize this a little bit better? Mostly because I'm coming from the agency world where we have processes and, a plan and everything is outlined, to just sitting at my computer Saturday night wondering, okay, is he going to send it tonight, or do I have to wake up at 7 a.m. on a Sunday to design stuff? So that's why the accidental part. It was not like I didn't apply for the job. I didn't even know it was a thing. To be honest with you, I didn't know that church communicator was a job title. As far as I knew, I was just helping my church. And in this pursuit of, there has to be a way for us to automate some things. There has to be a way for us to organize it. There has to be a way to create processes around it. It put me in a position to just seek ways to leverage technology mostly for that. So using things like Trello and creating some sort of a schedule for things, or having forms that we can send out so ministries can fill out what they need, and, creating organization and planning ahead. That was the main goal. So from there, once I started trying to work with churches and I realized the biggest need was education, I just applied all of that knowledge and said, you know what, I'm just going to share with you my experience, how I went from waiting on a Saturday night in front of my computer to having things organized and, even helping the pastor create strategies and plan ahead. So that's how it started. And I didn't know if it would be of value, to be honest with you, Jeremy. I was thinking, okay, it worked for me, but I wonder if it would be of value for other people. And so this year we ran 3 groups with about 7 people each. So there's about 21 graduates so far. And we meet on a Zoom conference call like we're doing right now. So people from many different states. They go through some videos during the week, and we meet for a small group. They have accountability. We set some milestones and missions and check in with them. So it's basically sharing my knowledge with people that are where I used to be. So, yeah.
Great. One last question for you. The church and ministries in general tend to be very slow to take technology and innovation and to embrace any of that, and tend to be very kind of old wineskins in terms of what they do.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, and how can that be overcome?
Isn't that true? So I think there's a tendency for us to stick to what works, to a point where it stops working and we don't realize. So, kind of like things change faster than our approach to things. That's why in some point in time, when you get older, and I'm speaking from experience, you're like, I don't want to learn this new program. I'm just going to keep using the one that I know, or I don't want to work to how to function, with this new phone or this new, you name it. I mean, for me, it's with TVs. Okay. I think TVs are going way too fast. Now I have like 3 remotes to turn it on, to turn on before I can. So, for me, it creates this, like, it's a mixture of laziness. Like, I don't want to take the time to learn, and a mixture of I'm comfortable here. So I'm just going to stick with what I know. So I prefer to get my iPad and watch something on Netflix in a small little screen than to go to the big screen, because so it's comfort is definitely this attachment to comfort that we have, and the learning curve. I feel like there is a learning curve for technology that sometimes we're just not willing to invest in, but I don't know, I feel like the church should be the place that really takes it to the next level over and over and over, because we have the greatest message out there to spread, and whatever channels are available should be embraced, as long as they obviously don't deny anything that is within the Word of God. But channels are just channels. They're not evil or good in themselves, so they're just tools. They're just things, and I think we have an opportunity to reach far more than we have been, so through technology. Yeah.
Barbara, thank you so much for everything you've shared. It's been great catching up and hearing the great things you're working on. And I thank God for the work you're doing with all the churches. It's really amazing to hear everything that's going on.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm very excited with what you guys are doing. So keep me posted. And it was really nice to speak to you, Jeremy.
Definitely. Thank you.